Hello and welcome to Tiger Drop Films. If you're a returning viewer, then I sincerely thank you. Now, for the purpose of today's video, you're gonna have to be stuck with seeing my ugly mug in front of the camera. I know I haven't done one of these in a while, but I'm actually dealing with copyright this time. And what I mean is Toho and Legendary, I know they're way more hell-bent on copyright than any of the recent videos I've done that involve, video games, which is my own footage. So that's why it's going to be like this. But suffice to say, let's talk about Godzilla and King Kong. Two of the greatest cinematic icons of all time, and two that are still going strong to this day, which I'm happy to say. So, Godzilla and King Kong are pretty popular right now. There's a new film coming out, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, the next film of the MonsterVerse, and they've both had their own TV shows in the MonsterVerse as well. So, I just really wanted to take this video and kind of look back and talk about the purpose of Godzilla and King Kong as characters themselves, including the original crossover film. It's such a classic. So, sit back, grab your berry juice, and let's get into it. Godzilla and King Kong are incredible cinematic legends, and they're some of the last remaining household names that can carry a film just by their name alone, kind of like the old Hollywood action stars of the 90s and 2000s. And one thing that's really interesting about Godzilla and King Kong is how many different interpretations they've had over the years. Now, King Kong himself has really had a bunch of remakes, which is not a bad thing, because I believe that if you're going to remake a story, well, King Kong is one of the best ones to do it. It's such a classic Hollywood tale with terror, horror, action, romance, adventure, and tragedy. That's why I think the story of King Kong is all about. And now, as we've come to the MonsterVerse, King Kong himself has really grown a little bit past that into being just a big action hero. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But King Kong himself is a character of loneliness. And when you look back on his remake films, whether it's the 76 film or the 2005 film, it's really interesting how they're able to explore different parts of King Kong as the monster. Where in those films he's a bit more empathetic, or maybe even to some sympathetic compared to his original appearance. And I think it's cool that someone like King Kong is able to evolve but still just be such a present force in people's imaginations. I mean, when you think of King Kong, I'm sure you think of him climbing to the top of the Empire State Building and falling for a blonde woman and Beauty Kill the Beast and all that. Or maybe you know him for the action in fighting a T-Rex or 2 or 3 or some kind of other monster. But that's King Kong. There's so many incredible parts to his story, and I still enjoy it whenever we get an actual new take on King Kong that doesn't have to adhere to the structure of the original. And that's why I really enjoy Skull Island. I think it was a cool action blockbuster that did hit a lot of the classic notes of King Kong that we've come to love, but it's still a pretty new story. And seeing that King Kong become the one that fights Godzilla in the MonsterVerses, a joy to see, even if I do have quite a few big problems with the MonsterVerse, and which we'll get into this video. But King Kong, he's a legend and he deserves every right to be. If there was one way I could hone in on what sets Godzilla and King Kong apart, but what also they have in common as the creation of these characters, it would have to be in this way. King Kong was created after World War I, while Godzilla was created after World War II. Two tremendously catastrophic wars that impacted human history and even to how we are to this day. But I think if we kind of look at it that way, you can really see what sets them apart as gigantic monsters that challenge mankind in different ways. Since King Kong was made after World War I, the war of the end-all wars, so to speak, at the time, we can really see how mankind evolved to using new kinds of weapons in war. Tanks, airplanes, heavy artillery, what have you. And I think if you look at it in that context, with the Great Depression following, and then the creation of King Kong as mankind still trying to discover uncharted territory in the form of Skull Island, which leads to King Kong himself, this sort of lost paradise that is beautiful, enchanting, mesmerizing, but at the same time dangerous and completely foreign to man. And the only way that mankind's able to survive this place is by bowing down to King Kong in the form of the Skull Islanders. That's what makes it even more tragic when King Kong is taken to New York City, where he continues to fall for beauty, the beauty that is able to kind of tame him, but ultimately leads to his demise by mankind's modern weapons, the airplanes, as he's lost in his own unique paradise to King Kong, New York City. Then when we look at Godzilla himself, he's gigantic. He resembles a prehistoric animal, but he's a prehistoric dinosaur that's been bestowed by the power of modern horrific weapons. And yeah, everybody and their mother can tell you about the nuclear weapon allegory, especially after -1, but what I find interesting is you look at how Godzilla was created after World War II in the context of Japan, and I think the idea of a dinosaur having the power of nuclear weapons and pretty much shoving our own missiles back up our ass and putting humanity in our place is a good way of describing Godzilla. He fights back, and he's mean, and he really shows humanity the folly of our own power. I think that's a good way of how I would like to hone in on what makes Godzilla and King Kong different, but this sort of commonality where they were both each birthed by their creators after two catastrophic events in human history. They represent the unknown, but not just the unknown, a face to the unknown that would grow over time and show how, while yes, they both represent different kinds of fears of humanity, conflicting with nature, and ourselves trying to adapt to all this new technology we don't even know how to use, I think it's kind of cool if King Kong and Godzilla have become symbols of growth for America and Japan, while at the same time they can always come back and put us back in our place. What's really interesting is how Godzilla himself is also still vibrant to this day. I've already talked about -1 on his channel. They even have an old video about respecting the Toho films. But what's really cool is there's so much Godzilla out there. And I do appreciate the MonsterVerse for kind of touching on that a little bit. But one thing that's really cool is just how versatile Godzilla is. And no matter what, yeah, I'm always cheering for him. But then you have the original 1962 classic King Kong vs. Godzilla. And you might be wondering, what's the purpose of that film besides having a big fight between the two? Well, that is the purpose of the film, a great crossover at that, especially back in the 60s. But the original King Kong vs. Godzilla was also the third film for each of those monsters. Before that, they both had their original debut films, but they also had one sequel that was quickly rushed into production. For King Kong, it was Son of Kong, and for Godzilla, it was Raids Again. And the original King Kong vs. Godzilla was also the first time each of these characters are seen in color, which is pretty awesome. And I think that the original King Kong vs. Godzilla is the embodiment of what we think of when we think of monster kaiju brawls to this day. But there's a bit more to it than that. You see, that original film was written by Shinichi Sakazawa, who I've mentioned a little bit across this channel and my good buddy's podcast, G-Force the Kaiju Podcast. You should check that out. Bunch of great episodes, you're going to hear me on it. But the original King Kong vs. Godzilla is also directed by Ishiro Honda, and he's my favorite director of all time. But the important thing is that this original film was able to move past just being about the monster fights, even though it's what we were here to see. You see, it's really about a satire on commercialism and the rising of the TV industry at the time. But, you know, when I talk about satire, it isn't just to seem profound or smart. I just think it's a nice way just to kind of touch upon reality. That's all there is to it. And I think that really just helps elevate the film to something different. And you see it throughout visual gags, dialogue, and other funny visual jokes in the film. And especially Mr. Taco. He's just this hilarious character who is so angry at Godzilla's reappearance that he orders his film crew, his pharmaceutical company, who has a TV station, to go find King Kong, or some kind of, as the film calls it, some mammoth god, to bring to Japan so that they can rank in more views instead of Godzilla, who's been off terrorizing people and getting on the news. I just think it's such a humorous way to bring these two together, but it just stands out. It really does. And the important thing is, even though the original is a bit of a satire and it plays things humorously, it still portrays a serious story about, well, two monsters on the loose to end up in fighting each other and having their own moments to highlight why they're iconic characters. Like in that original film alone, you get to see Godzilla destroy a train, and then later on King Kong himself destroys a train. You just gotta remember, in the original film, when they both debuted, they attacked the trains. I think that's kind of a fun callback that was still new and fresh. And when I think about the original King Kong versus Godzilla, I just think it's a film that truly is a classic, and it has reasons to back it up. And I think that it holds such a high standard that it really set the tone for the idea of a versus film that would see if Godzilla alone and then other characters from Gamera to the Ultra series. And I think it's very important to highlight that the original King Kong vs. Godzilla was such an interesting commentary on the rise of media. And as you see today in the modern age, we're still dealing with new surges in media and other sorts of rising problems. And when I think about that original film, I think it was pretty foretelling of the future in a way, as people just want monster fights, and I think that alone kind of puts a bit of a stigma on these characters that they're just the monster fights. And believe me, I love these monster fights. It's blew away my imagination as a kid, seeing kaiju duke it out of all sizes and powers. But that King Kong vs. Godzilla definitely still had a story to tell that I think is important to note. Honestly, I like to liken kaiju films to martial art films. As in, yeah, we're here for the martial art fights, the kaiju fights. We just want the spectacle and the entertainment. But if a martial arts film also has a really damn good story and characters with it, then I enjoy it even more. And that also applies to kaiju films. As we flash forward to the modern day, we finally got to see Godzilla and King Kong interact once again and brawl in 2001's Godzilla vs. Kong. A film that, while I still really do enjoy it, I do think it has to rank a bit more on the bottom just because of all the potential that we saw leading up to the film, from scripts to leaks and to scenes that were complete, but they're left on the cutting room floor, because I genuinely think Godzilla vs. Kong could have been stellar. Not just to put your own fan rewrites on it, no, but they really had so much they wanted to tell if you look into the production of the film. That's why I think it's a shame that the finished product is so bare bones. And while there are still, of course, a few hell yeah moments like the carrier fight and Godzilla and Kong teaming up against Mechagodzilla, there's still some great things to enjoy. I just think it's a shame that the human cast of this film was so sidelined and brought down to what a lot of the general audiences and critics stigmatize as the stereotypes in these films. And what I mean is just that it's only about the monster action, not the human characters. And I just think that's a shame. Because in the original we had a wide array cast of characters, including the inventor's side character, who earlier on we see his invention of the super rope come into play in the finale, where it's how they're able to lift King Kong and transport him to the final fight. And when we look at Godzilla vs. Kong, there's really not a character that does that to the same degree. And the closest we get is that Bernie guy, but where they dump his whiskey onto the control panel for Mechagodzilla, which it's just, it felt too convenient. And I think the whole having a conspiracy podcaster as part of the cast in a Godzilla vs. Kong film was actually kind of stupid. And then you got Ronnie Chang, like the great Ronnie Chang. He had a cameo in the film. I think he would have been a great sort of just comedic character that should have been part of the main cast. You know, if it was him berating Godzilla and King Kong for ruining something in his life, I think that would have been gold. But another bit of squandered potential in that film. And then you got the character Rin Sarazawa, who comes out of nowhere and leaves out of nowhere. And if you're a returning viewer, then you know I do talk about the Yakuza series a lot on this channel. And the actor for Rin Sarazawa played a great antagonist in Yakuza 6. So the fact that he was so sidelined in this film, the missed potential just goes through the roof, and it disappoints me. There's so many characters in Godzilla vs. Kong that have potential, and by God, you know that in a novelization, even the old script leaks and whatnot, and what was actually shot, that Adam Wingard, the director, cut, there really could have been a great story about these characters trying to make it through Godzilla and King Kong as they come into contact and fight, and then it culminates in a Mechagodzilla team-up. And, there's so much potential that they should have capitalized on. And that's why whenever people compare Godzilla vs. Kong as a remake to the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, I roll my eyes because that's not the case. It just happens to be another film that features Godzilla and King Kong. And then we have the sequel coming up, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. And to be honest, I really want to be excited for it. But I'm kind of getting the same vibes I got of Godzilla King of the Monsters, where sure, there might be some cool shots and fan service, but I feel like it's just going to miss the mark on what these films really can be, because believe me, the MonsterVerse is everything going for it. It should. All their stories and films should be incredible, but there's always something bringing them down. I just don't know what it is. And once again, with Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, we got screenwriter Terry Rossita returning, who did the previous film. And the funny thing about him is that he was one of the original scriptwriters for the unmade 1994 Hollywood Godzilla film. So in a way, things have come full circle, but there's other scriptwriters, of course, in these Godzilla x Kong films, but I just feel like, that guy, he has talent, and I feel like a lot of these human characters in these two films just dropped the ball. I just don't know what it is. And as we approach closer and closer to the New Empire, man, I just feel like they're going too far into the dumb territory without having some kind of purpose to it. A purpose that serves the characters instead of just being a monster romp, if you know what I mean. And that Monarch show, they tried to do some of that, but once again, the human characters just fell flat. And I really want them to get these characters right. I don't know why Godzilla has to turn pink. There's nothing wrong with him being pink if it was just the atomic breath, but he's glowing pink all the time. It just kind of takes away from the power of the atomic breath, and then the rest of his design's kind of wonky. Then King Kong, he gets the Nintendo Power Glove. I don't think King Kong needs that kind of mecha power-up. Just let him be King Kong, he's powerful. God, if you remember the Peter Jackson video game, if you grew up playing that game, it was cathartic just being King Kong and using his wits and brute strength to overpower his opponents. And that's what I think whenever I think about King Kong. He's sure, it might be a bit of an underdog, but he's very damn powerful in his own right. And God, the axe, I don't know, between the axe and the Nintendo Power Glove, I just feel like they're kind of undermining what really are the strengths of King Kong himself, besides, of course, the whole empathetic side to his character. And as we saw in the trailer, we're getting another son of Kong for the first time since King Kong Lives. And I'm okay with that idea, but I feel like they're going to take the Marvel Disney approach and do all the wrong things with having a dumb, cute side character or whatever. That's why I think the problem is with the New Empire, as it was with the first MonsterVerse Godzilla King Kong crossover. I think they're chasing trends and trying to make these characters a little bit too warped for the modern audience. You know what I mean? And believe me, there really is no modern audience. There's just people that want to see damn good movies. And I think that the New Empire, with just all the things we see in the trailer, from the changes to Godzilla and King Kong themselves, to Son of Kong and the two new villains just being parallels to Godzilla and King Kong, which, I don't know, I think if you want a really cool, interesting villain, don't just make pseudo copies of the titular characters, because I would rather see King Kong and Godzilla fight some bizarre looking monsters that are out of this world. They could be aliens, they could be mutants, they could just be monsters, I don't know. And I just feel like it's a missed opportunity, because when are we going to get Godzilla and King Kong in another film? Huh? Is it really going to be the New Empire? Are we even going to get a sequel to that? I want it to succeed because, I love these two characters, but at the same time, it's like this weird juxtaposition where, hell yeah, I get to see Godzilla and King Kong in the same film and even team up. I don't mind them teaming up. But on the other hand, the director, Adam Wingard, is back. And I feel like he's going to take all the wrong notes from the success of Godzilla vs. Kong. And he's going to just inject a lot of BS into it and just make it so far different from what it really could be. Because believe me, Godzilla and King Kong are versatile. There's no doubt about that. But the fact we're getting a big Hollywood production of these two characters, again, I just want them to succeed, and I want them to really earn that success with their just being themselves. And sure, I'll be there just to see these two guys on the big screen, but that's kind of going to be it, to be honest. It's just going to be Godzilla and King Kong, and I just feel like if you look at the purpose of Godzilla and King Kong, these characters, these icons that are versatile, but have so many great stories under their belt, and they can even both represent different things. Like Godzilla, he could go from being a hero to representing different factors of nuclear warfare throughout the decades, or even being a completely different origin from being this ultimate predator that takes over the planet as Godzilla Earth, or being made up of souls and GMK, or just being a great character like in 2000. Or then you have King Kong, who, as I've said earlier, can be a great Hollywood hero, or he can be this tragic, sympathetic beast that you feel for, or he can even be more monstrous and actually be, a beast that you still feel bad for, but you gotta take him down. There's so many different ways to explore these characters, and I just feel like the MonsterVerse has taken either the bare minimum or just slapping things on the screen to see where they go. And I think that can be a real damn shame. So, thank you guys for sticking with me and watching me discuss the purpose of Godzilla and King Kong. And really, I appreciate it. And please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you're excited for the new film or just some of your favorite memories growing up with Godzilla and King Kong. And please be sure to check out G-Force the Kaiju podcast. My friends, they're incredible. They got a lot of great discussion. They can say things better than I ever could. But thank you for watching. I've been Tiger Drop Films, and please stay tuned because I got more coming. Alright.